Okay, so I'm going to do a quick intro into Photoshop. We're going to create some templates for width and height. So one good way to do it is just to go to Web, and we can pick Web Large, make sure it's at 72 pixels per square inch, 1920 by 1080. That's the standard 16 by 9 rectangle shape that you see at the movies. But you may want more of a square shape, more like the old-fashioned TVs. So if you go to New, we can do the same thing where we had 1920 by 1080, but we can actually bring this up to, let's say, 1400. Let's see if that makes more of a square for us. So that's more of a square. So these are going to be for our landscape type photos that are wide and not vertical. So I'm going to bring in a few photos, and I've saved some photos from the web, and I download them at full resolution. So hopefully we'll get some nice big images here. So I'm just going to bring in 3 photos, and if you right click, you can say open with Photoshop. I'm on a Mac, so it might look slightly different. And hopefully this won't bog down your computer too much. But let's start with this one, and we're just going to call this Save As 4x3 template. This isn't exactly 4x3, but it serves its purpose. So let's see if this one will work. So we just drag it in and see how it's bigger than the actual 4x3 space. So in Photoshop, the 2 main things that you want to have open are your history, because you can undo things here, but you also want to make sure you have your layers open. And so here I have layer 1 and 2. If I turn off this layer, it's just the white background. If I turn off that layer, it doesn't really do anything. But anyway, and then this is your cursor. That's how I'm able to move things around. But if I accidentally had it on something else, oops, I had it on the wrong thing. I didn't have it on the cursor. So you can just use your history and undo it. So I go back up to my cursor. And what I want to do is make this image look the best within the window. So I'm going to do what's called a transform. And before I transform, sometimes you need to double click on the actual layer to unlock it. So if for some reason it won't transform, if it's grayed out, just go in and double click. So if you go into, you can either do free transform or transform for scale, and you'll see, you should see, yeah, you see these squares. And so I'm going to bring the image down manually by just dragging and getting it how I want. So if I want, so I'm not using the whole image, but I'm using some of it. And if I just hit return, if I want to see, this little hand tool's nice because if you move things around, you can get it back in the center by pushing the hand. Okay, so I actually don't quite like what I did there. I want to do a little bit more moving and bring that sync up. So I like that a little bit better. And so here we have this 4x3 template. Now we're going to actually export the image. And I'm going to go export. And I'm going to say export as. And I'm going to go ahead and change this to JPEG because we don't need to have a transparency. PNG, you can have the background like a logo, transparent. And here's where we can reduce the size of our image so it'll be optimized for the web. So we really only need 1,000 pixels wide, and it automatically scales it for us, so we don't have to worry about putting that height. So we've got width of 1,000, height of 729. And we just say export all. Let's see, because I accidentally still had more than one layer, but it doesn't matter because it's going to be a JPEG. So I'm just going to call this bathroom 1000 and save. And we're going to go back and look at that document. Website. I called it bathroom. Here we go. I'm going to open it with Photoshop. If you just double click on it, it opens in preview. And now I can go have a look and say image size. And look, it's 1000 by 729. So that's exactly what I needed for that size. So I'm going to enclose this. Keep in mind this is a template. We can be dragging other photos onto this 4x3 template PSD. So I'm going to drag this one over here, and it's quite a large photo. And so again, we go to Edit, go to, not image size, sorry, edit, transform, scale. And another way we can scale it actually is if we wanted to, we can just go 50. Sorry, I have a puppy whining in the background if you wonder what that noise is. Oops, I put 500%. Let's not do that. Okay, so now we've got 50%. So that's another way we can do things. And I can go export as, and again, it's saved my preferences, so that's nice. I go export all, and I call this bus, and it saves. Okay, so I saved that as a JPEG that was more of a square image, more of a 4x3 image. But say we wanted to do a 16:9 that goes wider across the screen. We have this other template that I haven't saved yet, so let's just save it. And say 16 by, oops, not 8, 9 template. And I save. And I have this big bus image, oops. So I wasn't on the cursor. You gotta be on the cursor. Drag it in. And I'm going to try that trick again where I just do 50%. We'll see how we do. So 50% is looking pretty good. How do I want to do this? So maybe even try 30. Don't want to do 3000. I'll break Photoshop. Wheel of Death. This is the danger of doing it with the percentages. If you accidentally hit a 0, it freaks out because it thinks it wants us to do something at 30,000 pixels. So I just killed Photoshop. So we open it up again. Oh, look, it recovered my bus. Wasn't that nice of them? So, the 16:9 template. And I wanted to bring in Control click, open with Photoshop. I'll drag it in. I'm just going to use my transform because I don't want to break Photoshop again. And there are my corners. I couldn't see them at first. And so I'm bringing this down. Instead of putting 30%, I put 30,000%, and it made Photoshop crash. So here we go. That's a nice way to crop the image, I believe. And we can export this one now as a JPEG. So we go export as. So we're going to save the width at 1000. And it should automatically adjust it. Yep, it did. And we're good. I say export all. Call this bus. And now we have two. Oops, I saved that as a PNG. Oh well. Let's see how big what the difference is. So that one is 2.1 meg saved as a PNG, and this one is not even a full meg. So you can see that the PNG is the lossless compression, and so that's a heck of a lot bigger image. So I would want to go back in here and I would do export as JPEG. All right, let's try this bus. Or let's do bus wide. Alright, let's have a look now. This should be interesting. So, our bus wide was, what did I say? 2.1 megs. This one's 545 kilobytes. So that's quite, quite a reduction in size. And, you know, anything under a meg for sure will load on the website super fast. Anything over a couple megs, it might take a little while for it to come up, and nobody likes to wait for web pages to load. But real quick, just to show you, so this is what it looks like if you saved it in the 16:9. This is what it looks like if you saved it in more of a 4:3. So this is old-fashioned television, but looks good on the web, usually. This is usually good for a hero image, that's for wide, but then sometimes you do want to do vertical images. I'm going to pick this one, and I'm going to click the orientation to be vertical, and I already know that I want it a little bit wider just from experience of trying to make this tutorial. There we go. It's a bit fatter than it would be if I did a 16:9 vertical. It'd be very skinny, and you usually don't have super skinny vertical images. Okay, so now I need a vertical image I need to bring in. I downloaded a bunch of images from the web. Creative Commons, if you do a Google image search and type Creative Commons, that's one way to get photos that you can use, or you can go to Wikimedia. It's not Wikipedia, it's Wikimedia, and search for your city location. Okay, yep. Control click, open with Photoshop. And sometimes, if for some reason you can't drag this photo, well, we don't even have layers open. We've got to go back and open our layers. Layers. See this lock? Sometimes if you try to drag the photo, it won't work because it's locked. So right now we just unlocked it. Okay, and then we had this, which we need to save it as a template. We don't have to save it as a template, but if you want to use it over and over again, it's a good idea. So I'm just saying vertical template 4x3-ish. And I'm saving it as a PSD. It keeps your layers, whereas if you do a JPEG, you lose your layers. Okay, so dragging it in, and that looks good. So it's not quite the right size, but again, we go to File, Edit, Transform. You can even go free transform. The shortcut's this Command T. And if you were to go here, it resizes it. So any of these squares resizes it. And so, we need the top of the building and the bottom of the building. So let's see. We may have to sacrifice something because it doesn't quite fit. So we could resize the template, or we could just say, you know what, no one knows there's anything on the bottom. Okay, so you hit return, and it's ready to go, and we need to go export. Export as. We definitely don't want to do PNG. Do JPEG. And instead of saving the width at 1000, we're going to save the height at 1000. And it should convert it. Yep. And export all. And I could say building. I probably should have said building 1000. But now we have these images that aren't very big, half a megabyte. That's pretty darn good. Those will all load really fast into the website, but also looks good on any screen. You can always go smaller when you are using photos. So the smaller it goes, it looks great. But if you take a really small photo, look at this. This is, if I drag this one in, it's way too small. Here I can do an example for you what happens when you make it come up. So I'm started with a small image, and I'm bringing it up to fit the 4x3 screen, but you can see how pixelated this is getting. With Photoshop, if you want to zoom in, you see a minus sign on the magnifying glass, but if you hit Option, or it may be a different control on a PC, and then click, you can zoom in. And you take Option off, it goes back to negative. But you see how terrible that is? So, like I said, don't size up, size down. But if we turn this layer off, we can take this eyeball off. You see, our original image is still holding up pretty well under high magnification. So I'm going to zoom back out. But we've got multiple images on here. And so when you're exporting things out for your template, you can have multiple images. You can delete these if your system's bogging down. Photoshop uses a lot of RAM. And so if it's really slow, you may have to decide, oh, well, let's get rid of some of these other layers and export them individually. All right, I got off on a tangent. If you want to know any more about Photoshop, lots of resources out there. If you have a library card, you can go to lynda.com, lynda.com. You put your library card number in, and you have access to all the free tutorials there. So, good luck.